I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review. This is the Dunu Titan S2. This is a new single dynamic driver IM from Dunu coming in at 80 bucks. And while there's a lot of IMs at around 80 bucks these days, in fact, I think I just reviewed one, the Titan S2, I'm just going to tell you right now, this thing stands out for its accessories package. And we're going to dive into exactly why. But this, what you see here for $80 is an insane accessories package. We'll dive into why I like it so much, but we'll also talk about the sound, fit, form factor, all that good stuff. So yeah, I've had the Titan S2 for about a week and a half or so. I've been listening to it, comparing it with some other IMs in its price range, and I'm ready to let you know what I think. But before we get into that, a quick shout out to Dunu for sending this IM for review. If you want to check out the Titan S2, I've got them linked in the description down below. But with that out of the way, let's dive in and talk about this incredible accessories package. Then we'll get into the rest of it. So here's the box, the packaging for the Titan S2. Nice, classy red box. I actually really do kind of like that. It's nice looking. But that is just the start of it, because everything that you get inside of it, while, I don't know, this is all the accessories that you got with, like, they're much more expensive IMs. And Dunu typically does a really good accessory package, even with their most expensive IMs. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just talk about it. This is the carry case that comes with a lot of their more expensive IMs. It's a little bit on the large side in terms of like pocketability, but it's a nice thickness. It's got a nice zipper, and it's just got generally nice quality materials all around. So semi-hard shell. I like this carry case. This is one of my favorite carry cases that come with IMs, and it comes here with the Dunu Titan S2 at 80 bucks, which is pretty impressive. In addition to that, you get a plethora of silicone ear tips. Now, they don't include any foam tips, which is interesting. Actually, maybe it's not that interesting. Dunu just doesn't really tend to do foam tips. But if you like silicone tips, they give you 4 different styles to play with, including their S&S tips, which a lot of people are a big fan of. I'm not personally a big fan of. They've got this one that's just pretty much a basic. This is like your standard silicone tip. They've got this one, which is a little bit on the firm side. And I like the rounded shape of this tip, but this is another one that Dunu includes a lot. And then finally, they also include their candy tips, which personally, this is my favorite tip that is included in the package. Now, you might be looking at this and be like, hey, there's only 4 tips on the table. That's not that many tips. There are 3 sets of each of these, like large, medium, and small. Look at this. Look at all these stinking tips. Dunu, do you want other IEM companies to be able to feed their families? Like, what is going on? How are people going to compete if you're including this much crap in an $80 IEM? All right, sorry. All right, that was a bit much. All right, let's move this stuff aside. Let's talk about the cable. We're going to get into talking about the build quality and form factor on this IM. But before I toss this thing aside, a note on this cable is that this is a swappable termination cable, and it's using Dunu's new Q-Lock mini system, which I actually really like. So you unscrew this, you can pop off this end, and now you can turn a standard 3.5 millimeter single-ended cable into a balanced cable if you so choose. I personally happen to think that balanced cables are a meme, and it's not really worth it, but if you're into balanced cables, you can do it. And then for people like me that aren't into balanced cables, there's really no penalty, because this termination is still nice and compact, and I don't mind it at all. Really well done. Again, like, this is not the first time that Dunu's done this. This new termination system showed up on the Dunu, oh my gosh, the Da Vinci, which I just recently reviewed, but that's a $300 IM. Reminder, this guy's only 80 bucks. And that's not even the only part about this cable that I like, because the rest of the cable is frankly pretty freaking fantastic. I want to buy this cable separately, or, you know, honestly, even just buy $80 Dunu Titan S2s to get this cable. 80 bucks just for this cable. I know it's not like super cheap, but it's not out of the realm of reasonableness. It's a nice cable. So as you can kind of tell, it is a cloth covered cable, at least down here at the bottom half. Then you get to the Y-split, which is nice and compact. I like that. And then above the Y-split, you've got exposed silicone, or just, you know, your normal plastic covered cable. So what I like about this, all right, so this fabric coveredness at the bottom, it behaves really well. As you can see, it rodeo wraps quite well. It stays in place. Really nice behavior on this cable all around. You can see it's not memory prone. It's not overly stiff. It's maybe a little bit stiffer than your average like silicone cable, but that's, you know, kind of expected for a cloth covered cable. But what I really like about this is, so Dunu actually recently released a $30 cloth covered cable, very, very similar to this one. And that is actually an excellent value for what it is. I don't review cables, but it's an excellent little cable for 30 bucks. This one's even better though, because it's silicone up top. One of the problems that you often get with a cloth covered cable is microphonics, like this thing rubbing up against your shirt. A lot of the times, if you're using a cloth cable, that sound will kind of travel into your ear and it can be a little bit annoying. Not like the end of the world for me, but it can be a little bit annoying. With this cable terminating or splitting apart into these silicone parts, it avoids that. I'd have no issues with the microphonics, and I get the benefit of this just nice plush cloth covered cable. So I am really a big fan of it. I also think it looks handsome. You've got a functional chin slider that stays in place. Good job, Dunu. And then of course up here you've got your pretty standard preformed ear hooks that terminate into a 2-pin connector. Now, let me pull that off. It is somewhat of a compact 2-pin connector, which I like. I like a compact 2-pin connector. The only downside is that it is a little bit, you can see that it's like molded for the Titan S2, which just means that, well, if I'm gonna steal this cable and put it on another IM, it's not going to be quite a seamless match as it is here on the Titan S2. But yeah, I don't know, just generally, all right, that's enough gushing about this cable, but it's a really nice cable. And again, really can't understate like how impressive it is that this is included on an $80 IM. But that will bring us into talking about the earpieces themselves, which are, if like really kind of almost as good as the cable. Aesthetically, I think they look pretty cool. Like it's got this very bright silver finish to it with that, you know, bright anodized red center. It's a nice look. It kind of looks a little bit Terminator-y, but in a way that I think it's pretty classy. I dig it. And I don't know, there's something about the finish that maybe it's just because it has so many corners and edges that I don't feel like it's overly prone to fingerprinting or scratching or anything like that. They just did a really good job with the finish. And I think that the overall package, let me punch out on that so you can appreciate it, is just a really nice, handsome IM. And that's not even the best part of the earpieces. The best part is the fit. So let me throw these things into my ears and we'll zoom in so you can take a look as I describe how well these things fit. So as you can see, it's fairly compact IM. I would describe this as like medium small size. You know, not quite as small as something like a Moondrop LAN or Sennheiser IE200, but in terms of fit, this thing's pretty fantastic. So it fits comfortably. You know, it does have some, you know, angled edges and stuff on the design, but I don't feel those at all on the Concha. So that's good. But maybe even more to the point, just the fit stability and security of this thing for a single dynamic driver IM is really pretty outstanding. I recently reviewed the Meze Audio Alba, which is a $160 IM that I also similarly praised for its fit. This guy, it's about as good as the Alba, and it's coming in at half the price, and it looks pretty cool too. So yeah, honestly, this guy's pretty stinking impressive when it comes to just all of the stuff physical form factor wise. The accessories package, which is again going to be putting other IM companies out of business because they're going to have to try and figure out how to compete with Dunu at $80 with all this stuff. And frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. So yeah, good job, Dunu. But of course, it also matters what this thing sounds like. So let's talk about what the Dunu Titan S2 sounds like. And to start with, we're going to take a look at Squiglink. So I've got this frequency response graph up on Squiglink right now if you want to check it out, linked in the description down below. But we'll go over it now. And I also want to just kind of caveat too that like I like frequency response graphs. They help me kind of analyze what I'm hearing, but they are not the end all be all when it comes to sound. That's my opinion. It's just that, you know, there are limitations that a graph, limitations in graphing and what it can tell you that doesn't necessarily substitute being able to hear the thing in person, okay? But nonetheless, I find them quite useful and fun. So what we see here in the frequency response is a pretty standard tuning, if I'm honest, a little bit on the basic side of a single dynamic driver tuning that is, pretty classically V-shaped, okay? And what I mean by that is that you've got bass emphasis and you've got treble emphasis. That gives you kind of that contrasty V-shaped sound. Now, let's dive in a little bit more detail. The bass emphasis is quite meaty. It is quite mid-bassy. It's not like super isolated to the sub bass, as is kind of the trend these days. So this is a little bit of a throwback in terms of its bass tuning, where you're going to get that bass emphasis. And it's not like, you can see here on the graph, like it's not absurd, silly, over the top bass emphasis. It's a nice, tasteful bass boost, but it's going to be a meaty, thick bass boost that is, again, you're going to feel it pretty regularly in most music. It's not going to be the sort of thing that only pops up in an occasional song that has a lot of sub bass. And then the upper mid-range emphasis, kind of like the lower treble region, this is where it gives it that contrastiness. And I would say overall, like in terms of what I hear to my ear, I think this treble emphasis in the graph seems a little bit understated. I wouldn't describe the treble on the Titan S2 as necessarily like strident or like overly bright or aggressive, but it's definitely a brighter, livelier sounding IM that sounds pretty forward in sort of that presence region. So if you're talking about things like just kind of like the edge of vocals, or even like the leading edge of like guitar strums and stuff like that, you get a little bit of extra emphasis on it with this tune. Now, that's the frequency response. That's kind of like the tonality and how I hear versus what the graph says. But what else can I say about the sound here on the Titan S2? So generally, the sound I would describe as, I'm going to use this word again, I apologize, but it's a very dynamic, punchy, lively sounding IM. It's got a pretty good sense of space between all the different instruments, bespoke sounds and stuff. It creates a good sort of head stage, for lack of a better word. And that can be quite a bit of fun, to be perfectly honest. Nice wide separation, it's contrasty, it's not overly sharp, which is good. That said, there are some weaknesses here, at least for my preferences. I think that the treble emphasis on this does have kind of like a weird splashiness to it. So again, it's not so much like a strident sharpness that's uncomfortable. It more just actually kind of detracts from the tangibility of high frequency percussion. So cymbals and stuff just sound a little bit shimmery and splashy and like indefinite. Whereas if I was actually playing around with EQ, I took a filter at around 5K, dropped it down a few dB, and while that had the effect of lowering the brightness, it actually had the effect, to my ear, of improving, let's call it the timbre, the tangibility of those cymbals and stuff like that. They just felt more metallic and real and weighty. Whereas without that EQ, you kind of just get this somewhat splashy, shimmery sound. And then the bass on the Titan S2, it's okay. It's a little bit on the woofy side. It's definitely more mid-bassy, less sub-bassy. So again, it does give you that good sense of physicality and punch in the attack, which is a lot of fun. But it doesn't so much have that follow through in the dig in the sub bass. And it can just kind of come across a little bit on the floppy side. So I would say this is certainly an inoffensive sound that errs on the side of being exciting and lively and fun without really being strident or uncomfortable. So they do a good job there, but it does kind of fall apart a little bit when it comes to just being controlled and like really, really buttoned down. It's the Titan S2 is not that sound. But how does it compare to some other IMs? All right, so I promised some IMs in this price range. Honestly, one of these is like half the price, but I like it a lot, so that's why I'm bringing it in. Here we've got the Moondrop Aria 2. Price on this, I believe, is 90 bucks, 80 or 90 bucks. And then here we've got the Moondrop Lan. This guy's just 40 bucks. So this is the little budget guy of the bunch. Let me start with the comparison between the Aria. I would say that the treble, I described this as being a little bit kind of swishy and shimmery. The treble on the Aria 2 is kind of similar, to be honest. They're pretty similar up in the top end. Overall, I would say that the Aria is tuned a little bit warmer. It is a little bit more down tilted in its frequency response, a little bit thicker in the low end. And the Titan S2 is going to give you more of that lively, more forward sound, but they're not too far apart on there. And the treble performance is frankly pretty similar between them. In terms of bass, I would say that the bass on the Aria does come across a little bit better in the sub bass, maybe a little bit less punchy in the mid bass. And I think some of that forwardness and that liveliness in the S2 also contributes to it sounding more separated and kind of bigger and more exciting, whereas the Aria 2 sounds a little bit more denser, laid back, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. They are, I would say, just kind of like two different flavors of somewhat similar level of performance. Between the two, in terms of sound, I'd probably take the liveliness of the S2, just a little bit more exciting and a little bit better separation between sounds. But if you've heard the Aria 2, you're familiar, or even just the Aria 1, you're familiar with the technical performance of that. I would say that the Titan S2 is in kind of a similar ballpark, although maybe a little bit better with the imaging. Now, let me bring in this guy, the Ringer, the Moondrop LAN. Now, the tuning on the LAN is, versus these other two, going to be a lot more relaxed in the bass. This is much closer to a neutral sound signature, which might sound pretty boring, but I personally, this is my jam. The LAN is really good. Listening to it versus the Titan S2, honestly, I actually think the bass on the LAN is better. Like, it's tighter, it's more controlled, it digs deeper. It's not going to give you quite that same level of punchiness and excitement that you get with the Titan S2. But if you're listening to music that just has really good quality bass, I think the quality of that bass is actually going to come across better with the LAN. Just the execution on it is just tighter and more controlled. And I think that also carries through for the treble. It's interesting, look at these things on a frequency response graph. Like, you might think that the LAN is just kind of like overly bright, neutral, lean, but listening to them in experience, this is the one that obviously comes across as the brighter, more lively sound, whereas this is just kind of like, the LAN is just really mature, buttoned down. The treble is quite well done. I would say neither of these are necessarily like super incisive in their treble, but the LAN definitely comes across as more controlled in its treble response, which does lend itself to a little bit better sense of that definition. So between these two, while I prefer this versus the Aria, I prefer the LAN versus the Titan S2. And it comes in at half the price. But of course, this guy does not come with the accessories package that this guy does. But that will have to do it for my thoughts here on the Dunu Titan S2 at around 80 bucks. Again, a pretty unreal, movie out of the way, a pretty unreal accessories package that you get here with the S2. 80 bucks. If you don't already have a nice carry case, you don't already have a really nice cable, and you don't already have a nice selection of ear tips, 80 bucks just for that, I honestly would recommend that. But if you've already got that stuff or you're not looking to upgrade that stuff, the IM itself is certainly not bad. I would say it's a fine sounding IM. I'll give it a solid 3 stars out of 5. Honestly, kind of tempted to go higher just because of the accessories package, but we'll stick with 3. And if you want to check this thing out, like I mentioned, I've got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you have not already, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit.